You have cancer. 3 words that change a life forever. We would like to offer another 3 words. Be an overcomer. Welcome to the 1% Podcast, where our conversations with other cancer warriors, survivors, and caregivers allows us to give you that extra boost you need to face your challenge head on, live life from a new perspective, and forge a path that keeps you moving free and clear. Now, welcome your host and cancer survivor, Truett Taylor.
Welcome to today's episode of the 1% Podcast, the show where we interview young adults who are battling or surviving an unexpected cancer diagnosis. You are not alone, and I promise, by consuming today's content, your soul will be fed with the hope, courage, and inspiration you need to keep fighting for today. I'm excited to be on your journey with you today. If you haven't done so already, be sure to head over to 1%podcast.com to sign up for our email list to see the latest news and updates for all our guests on the show. You can also check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1% Podcast. If you want to join in on some of our discussions, please join our Facebook group, the 1% Podcast. To contact me directly for content, questions, or booking events, you can email me at info@1%podcast.com. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 55 of the 1% Podcast. Got a great show for you guys today with Mr. Stephen Huff. Man, Steve and I have a phenomenal conversation, and there's some things he says that I will never forget for the rest of my life. But before we get into Stephen and I's interview, let's go over a quote that I just cannot get out of my head. The quote is, "Don't quit. Suffer now and live the rest of your life as a champion." Man, that just hits me so hard. There's so many things in life that we have to have a tremendous amount of endurance to get past. And, you know, if you think about someone running a race, the toughest part is right before the end. And the end is where you have all of the people, or most of the people, cheering you on. And I get to thinking about, you know, the times where you're going through your chemo, or you have a marriage that you're trying to push through the tough times, or a job, or a new business that you started, or just something in life that you need some endurance. You need some encouragement. You need someone to tell you not to quit. So for all those people out there that are suffering through a tough time right now, my advice and my encouragement for you right now, I'm the guy standing at the very end of the race, cheering you on and telling you don't quit. Even though you're suffering right now, keep pushing through, and no matter the outcome, you will be a champion for the rest of your life. You will have a story to tell, you will have people to impact, and you will have a phenomenal opportunity to really change the lives of so many people. So let's get into my interview with Mr. Stephen Huff. Stephen and I connected through, actually got an Instagram message from someone I didn't know at all, and they said, "Hey, you know, I'm in the lung cancer community, and I listened to all your episodes, but there's, you haven't really represented the lung cancer community yet." And I haven't done that intentionally, but he recommended Stephen to me, and Stephen and I connected, and we had the best conversation. Stephen's a former pro athlete. He graduated high school and was drafted and played in college, and had a great athletic career. And then in his late 20s, Stephen was diagnosed with lung cancer. And what's crazy about that is when we hear lung cancer, a lot of us think of the commercials and things we see on TV of people who, don't want us to use tobacco or any kind of products like that because it causes lung cancer. Stephen never smoked. And during our interview, he talks about, the only thing you have to have in order to get lung cancer, you don't have to smoke, you just have to have a pair of lungs. And so we go really deep into, how he got diagnosed, the signs and symptoms that he had. But Stephen dropped a quote on me about identity. And that's something I talk about a lot with everyone. You guys that listen to all the episodes, you'll know that. We talked about identity. And Stephen's quote, and you just seriously wait for this during the interview. He said, "My initial identity was Stephen the baseball player, and I really liked that. Then I became Stephen the guy with cancer. But those two weren't my real identity. My real identity is Stephen, the child of God." And we go into more details about that and how the cancer diagnosis kind of helped, him drive him back to his faith. And it's just a phenomenal story. Stephen's a wonderful guy. He's a great teacher. He's a high school teacher now in Franklin, Tennessee. So you guys enjoy my interview with Mr. Stephen Huff. Hey, Stephen, welcome to the 1% Podcast, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Stuart. How are you, man?
I'm doing good. So we've talked a little bit on the phone before. You got to hear a little bit about your story. I had someone reach out to me and say, hey, I love your podcast, but you haven't had anyone on your show in the lung cancer community. And I was like, you know what? You're exactly right. So they sent me your information and I reached out and we had a great conversation the first time we talked. And I thought you'd be a wonderful guest. Tell everyone a little bit about who you are and a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate you having me on and giving me the opportunity to speak a little bit about lung cancer and my journey, because I would certainly say lung cancer is something that I never saw in my future. At the age of 29, I had spent my entire life pretty much taking great care of myself in regards to health and exercise. In college, I played baseball, and then I got drafted professionally in 2010. And so I definitely would have considered myself a healthy individual, and I was very, hypervigilant about what I put in my body, and I considered, taking great care of myself and making good decisions. And in 2015, I was driving home from work one evening, and I noticed that I had this very tiny lump above my collarbone. And up to that point, I had never really shown any symptoms that anything in my body was going on, aside from, just the normal everyday cough and shortness of breath, when I get exhausted and things like that. But when I felt this lump, I did like kind of what most guys do, in the sense that we just say, hey, it's nothing, right? Like, I don't need to go to the doctor. I don't need to ask anyone about this. Less is more. So I really just kind of put everything on the back burner and continued life as normal. And so a couple months later, when I was laying in bed one night, I started to get this like wheezing sensation when I was trying to go to sleep. And my fiance at the time, now wife, Emily, was like, dude, you're not a snorer, but this wheezing's killing me. Like, I can't sleep right now. So you got to go to the doctor. And so a couple weeks later, I ended up going to a walk-in clinic where I was diagnosed with bronchitis, and I had the whole, checkup, the x-ray. They even looked at the nodule and said, you're a healthy young man, you're 29, and you're certainly in good shape. And this is something that, is very common. We're just going to give you some antibiotics and kind of send you on your way. And so after a couple of weeks on some normal antibiotics, I realized pretty quick that not only was it not getting better, but it was actually getting a little bit worse. And so that's when I took the next step and said, you know what, I probably just should go see my normal doctor. And I'll never forget, it was May of 2016, and I had just finished my first year as a high school teacher, where I teach computer science in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. And so I scheduled a CT scan, and I went to the imaging center and got the whole thing done, went through the tube and back. And I remember driving home and just thinking about everything I was going to do that summer, as making it through my first year as a teacher. And my phone rings, and it's my doctor. And I had just left the imaging center not 15 minutes before. And so I knew whatever this was not going to be good. And so when I answered the phone, my doctor said, hey, Stephen, can you talk? This is really important. Do you have a second? And I said, sure. So I pulled over, and he said, I just got your results, and they are not good. We don't know what's going on inside your body, but we did the CT of your chest, and you got a lot of stuff going on, and I'm not sure what it is, but I think you should see a specialist. And so I said, okay, when and where? Just tell me, I'll go see him tomorrow. And he says, well, you're going to see a physician that specializes in cancer called an oncologist. And man, that was really tough for me, because I just remember thinking, why in the world do I need to go see an oncologist? Like, what in the heck is this guy talking about? I had just ran a 5K 2 weeks ago. There's no way, like, I'm a healthy dude, And so I ended up going to the oncologist the next day. He was looking at my imaging, and he said the same thing. He said, Stephen, this is not good. We need to do a biopsy. We need to figure out what these spots are in your chest and go from there. So as walking through the journey of cancer, those are really like the longest 2, 3, 4 weeks of your life when you're waiting for the results of these tests. And that was when I really actually started to kind of feel sick. I had never shown any of the typical signs of, sickness or cancer. I wasn't losing weight. My blood counts were perfect. All things aside, I was very healthy. And so that was really the first time that I started to actually feel sick and in that waiting process. And so after a couple of weeks went by, my doctor calls me and says, Stephen, we have your results. I'd like for you to come in. And I think when he said that, I said, well, this is not good. He wants me to come in. And so sure enough, June the 1st, 2017, I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer.
Wow. It's a lot. Those weeks leading up to it, I'm sure you're just thinking all the things that we think of. Your mind goes crazy, right? You go from being someone healthy in your late 20s to all of a sudden the possibility of having cancer, right?
Right.
Whenever I got diagnosed, they want to check you and recheck you and double and all those things like that. Was there, when you go through all the thought process and the emotions, is there a part of you that thought, this isn't cancer, maybe it's something else? Or, how did you, I guess, if someone's out there waiting right now, they're waiting on those results to come in, like, what kind of thoughts and what kind of feelings did you have that moment during that waiting period that you could share with us?
Yeah, I think personally, my prior knowledge of cancer was essentially that it's an older disease. It's typically someone that's down the road. And essentially, I had never known anything other about lung cancer other than that it was related to smoking. Mm-hmm. And so in the back of my mind, I had to do a double take when he said it was lung cancer, because I said, wait a second, you're telling me not only that do I have cancer, but I have lung cancer. I remember, going into the oncologist before I was diagnosed, and I asked him, I said, what does this look like to you? And he said, well, it could be one of 3 things. Typically, when you have cancer in this part of your body, it's either lung cancer, it's either lymphoma, or it could be an infectious disease like sarcoidosis or tuberculosis. Mm-hmm. And so when I asked him to break down the severity of each, I was hoping for tuberculosis, and I was like, come on, give me tuberculosis. And so, when I was sitting at home, I was searching Google like crazy, trying to align up my symptoms with, these diseases and say, well, there's no way it's cancer. It's gotta be sarcoidosis or tuberculosis or one of these other things. And so there was a lot of, I guess, denial in the beginning. I was like, there's no way this is cancer. And so I think deep down in the back recess of my mind, I knew it was cancer. Mm-hmm. And so that was a very difficult thing for me to deal with in that moment.
Yeah, I think I went through the same thing. As like there's this eerie feeling of like, this is going to be a lot worse than I think it is. But there's also a hope of, I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's, in your case, tuberculosis. In my case, it was something else. Like, it's one of those things where when you're dealing with it, when you're processing it, you try to make up every scenario. I almost feel like it's a protection type mechanism. Like, okay, if it's this, I'm going to feel like this. If it's this, I'm going to feel like this. And you're kind of getting yourself ready. But then when you hear the words, like it's the worst, it's the one of the worst ones out of the group. It takes you a second, but then I also feel like you're somewhat prepared, but there's really no way to prepare to hear the words, you have cancer, right?
Right.
Especially, like you said, like, your cancer affects people who smoke and, older adults. Mine was the same way. It was all older adults. I didn't even know. I mean, no one my age gets colon cancer kind of thing. And
Right.
I didn't do anything to cause it. You weren't a smoker, I'm assuming, either, right?
Correct. Yes. I was never a smoker. Yeah.
So I don't want to say it's one of those bad luck things, but it's one of those things that we just didn't expect and it came out of nowhere. You talked a little bit about your diagnosis leading up to that. Let's take one quick step back and talk about why you feel like it's important for you to share your story. I know you said you went and played pro ball for a while and then you transitioned into the education field. You're around helping people every day, obviously. What grade are you teaching right now?
I teach high school, and so I teach freshmen to seniors.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. So you get, I worked in education for a while myself, and high school kids, I had to work with high school kids all the time, and I knew that's not something I could do forever. So you're a special person if you can do that.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
But why do you feel like it's important for you to share your story with everyone?
Well, I think there's a couple of different reasons. And reason number one, I would say, is being your own advocate as far as your health advancement. I think just as guys in general, we almost have this innate, not fear of going to the doctor. Well, I guess some people have fears of going to the doctor. We have this innate Superman mentality, especially if we ever did anything in athletics or where we were, good and we thrived. And I think just growing up, it was always instilled by my parents that it was just like, you're healthy, you take care of yourself. And so being an advocate, first and foremost, listening to your body and just knowing, when something's not right, because I can look back 2 years before I was diagnosed and I can say, without a doubt, there were some things going on that were abnormal and that I probably should have got checked out. But because I was, you want to call it pride or, just being, being busy, I just didn't do it. And so I would say advocating for yourself first and foremost is definitely something that I am a huge proponent of. But secondly, specifically with lung cancer now, I have to talk about my story because lung cancer is a disease that is almost, it's almost like the elephant in the room type thing where people say, such and such has lung cancer. I didn't know he smoked, or I didn't know he was around smoke. And people associate it with this, smoking. And the reality is lung cancer can affect anyone. In all you need are lungs to get lung cancer. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to my doctor's office, and I remember sitting there, and she looked at me and she said, Stephen, a lot of people are going to ask you if you smoked, and you just kind of need to be prepared for that. And I remember thinking in my head, I'm like, well, nobody's going to ask me that, right? Like I look like a young, normal, healthy dude. And the reason being is because there's always been, even since I was a kid, there's always been this association. You think about all of the preventative ads that you see on television. It's the people that have the tracheal box, right. and it's the woman that's climbing the mountain of cigarettes, and it's always don't smoke or you'll get lung cancer. And the reality is, yes, smoking is definitely the leading cause of lung cancer, but there are so many people that get diagnosed that either never smoked or they quit a long time ago, and we don't really know why. We don't know why. We don't know what's really causing it. And the numbers have been telling us that people are getting diagnosed younger. People are getting diagnosed that are healthy. And so the fact that I can use my story and say, look, I was a young guy. I was healthy. I made good decisions at least most of the time. And I got lung cancer. And so I'm living proof that, essentially if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important for people, to be aware of that, not to scare people, but to just be aware of it. Like lungs are a big part of your body. And just like, you have liver, you have kidneys, you have all these other organs that you can get cancer and you can get them just the same in lungs.
Yeah. So describe your treatment cycle. So once you were diagnosed, what was the next steps? And you said you were stage 4. So can you break that down for people maybe who have experienced a different type of cancer? I know there's some cancer has stages to it, some doesn't. Can you break down what stage 4 lung cancer is to everyone?
Yeah, that's a great question. So stage 4 lung cancer is essentially that the primary tumor is located in the lungs, and then there's an additional metastases in a organ that is not located in the lungs. So like the liver, anything kind of anywhere, I guess, technically speaking. So when I was diagnosed, my primary tumor is sitting right on my bronchial tubes. And then I have secondary lymph nodes all in the right side of my chest, which was part of the lymph node that popped up in my neck. And then I also have a couple of really small spots on my spine. And then I also have a spot on my liver. And so stage 1 lung cancer would be one spot and one lobe. So you have 3 lobes in your lungs, and you can have them all in the same lung, and it can still be considered stage 1 or 2. And so the treatment options for that were pretty limited. I won't say limited, but they're pretty specific. And when I was diagnosed, I'm like getting ready for this whole journey of chemo, radiation, surgery. Well, I found out quickly that I was not a candidate for surgery due to the nature that it had already spread. And so I had even gotten a port put in. I was getting ready to do my first cycle of chemo. And what I had done was I had this one last genetic testing done that took some tissues of my tumor to see if I was eligible for any of what's called a targeted therapy. So in lung cancer, just in the last probably 5 to 10 years, they've developed some very specific treatment options. And one of those is what's called a TKI. And so when I got this genetic testing done, my tumors express this mutation. It's called anaplastic lymphoma kinase mutation. Some people know it as the ALK positive mutation. And so when that came back, my doctor was like, Stephen, this is the best news ever. I'm like, okay, best news ever? Maybe not, but second best news ever. Okay, we'll take that. So I actually started on this targeted therapy June 22nd, 2017. So roughly 3 weeks after I was diagnosed. And all it is it's 8 pills a day. And I take them in the morning and at night. And they are so easy relatively compared to chemotherapy. Mm-hmm. The side effects are very minimal. And most importantly, it allows me to live a completely normal life, meaning like I haven't missed a day of work. And, I get to do all the things that newly married couples get to do, like, walk our dogs, drink our coffee in the morning, and just live life. And so the therapy that I'm on, I am extremely blessed to be on it, and I'm having great results right now. And as of, I guess, in about 2 weeks, I will have been 2 years stable since diagnosis.
Nice. And when they call it stable, are they saying that nothing has grown or it's regressed, or what are they saying?
So, yeah, that's a great point. So a lot of times people, when I tell them that I've been stable for a couple of years, they assume that it's gone.
Right.
And technically, it isn't gone. It's actually still there. However, the first 9 months, everything shrank about 60 to 70%.
Wow.
So the primary tumor was down from, I think, 4 centimeters to now it's down to like just under 2 centimeters.
Wow.
A lot of the small lymph nodes just resolved. The spot on my liver is down to like 5 millimeters. And so nothing's grown, nothing new has popped up. And, Yeah, I'm doing really well.
Is there a certain amount of time that you have to be on this treatment, or is this like a lifetime type thing, or what?
Well, the good news is they don't necessarily know just yet.
Okay.
I guess it's good and bad. Good because it can work for a really long time, and I can take it as long as it continues to work.
Okay.
This drug is so new. It just got FDA approved the November before I was diagnosed. So, 7 months before I was diagnosed, I wouldn't have been able to take this drug. In the trial phases and up to this point, the average mean progression time is about 36 months. So roughly 3 years-ish is the average time that it worked. But see, the problem is in the trial phases, it was for patients that it wasn't their first line of therapy. So it could have been their second, third, fourth line. So they don't really know how long it'll work on first line treatment. So I guess you could say I'm kind of on the cutting edge of research now, technically speaking. So the hope is that it works forever. Ideally I would love to stay on it forever.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, that's okay too. I'll just have to kind of redo that whole process over where they rebiopsy and they can say, okay, why did it stop working? Did it shift mutations? Did it, what's going on? So maybe I can, take another different type of targeted therapy.
Would this be under the lines of immunotherapy?
It is very similar to immunotherapy, but it is still technically it's not immunotherapy. But it is in a sense that these pills that I take essentially turn the light switch on for certain cells in my body to attack the tumor, kind of like how the immunotherapy does. Mm-hmm. But immunotherapy is usually given like intravenously, through your port, and you have to go in and you have to do cycles, very similar to chemo. This drug is literally, it's like a capsule. I just pop it. It works for 12 hours, so I have to take it twice a day. And it kind of does the same thing, except technically it's not the immune system that's killing the cancer. It is like it's a different part of the body's defense.
Yeah. So you found this out by going to get genetic testing right before you were supposed to start the whole chemo process and everything, right?
Yes. So the scary part is, when I was diagnosed, as you can remember, like you go in there and, I don't know about you, but when I went in, it was my wife and my mother works in cancer research. And so I thank the Lord every single day that my wife was there and my mom taking notes, listening, because a lot of the stuff that the doctors were saying, I just didn't remember. And I remember leaving there and we were adamant about one thing, we were going to do this genetic testing. And not every physician does it. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the scary thing about it too, when you think about it, is because if I had not done this genetic testing, then I would have gone on a completely different therapy. I could have done standard care. I could have done chemo. I could have done radiation. And not that wouldn't have worked, but it certainly wouldn't have been my first line, the recommended first line mm-hmm. that I would have gone on. So every day I'm thankful for that. It's something that I hear patients in lung cancer are not doing. Right. And man, it just absolutely, it makes my skin crawl when I hear that.
So you talked about, having you go in the route of treatment where you have a lot less side effects and everything. I love talking to people about their lowest moments. We all have certain moments where whether it's our mind that gets the best of us or our body or our spirit, whatever it is, we all get into some sort of funk or get challenged in some sort of way. It's different for everyone. Sometimes it's all three. Sometimes it's just one of those things. If you had to describe your lowest moment to everyone, what would it be?
Man, that's a great question. And there is no doubt in my mind that I remember vividly. My lowest moment was about a week and a half after I was diagnosed. And let's just say this. I've never been skinny in my life. Even growing up as a kid, I was always the husky kid. Yeah. And in high school, I lifted weights a lot. In college, I lifted weights a lot. I've always been kind of on the bulkier side. Mm-hmm. And when I was diagnosed and sitting in that room and hearing, Stephen, you have cancer, and hearing, it's stage 4, it's inoperable, there's no cure, all these different things. I just remember going home and I just didn't want to do anything. Mm-hmm. I remember sitting, in bed thinking, looking at the ceiling, not being able to sleep. And I just remember thinking, this is it. This is like what my life is now. Like, I'm going to be lucky if I live another year. And I just asked this girl to be my wife. And now I've drug her into this situation. Like, what have I done? Like, why me? Why is this going on? And over the course of about a week or two, I lost almost 30 pounds. I was not eating. I couldn't eat. The food made me just sick. It made me feel like I was going to throw up. And every time I ate, it grossed me out. And I remember stepping on the scale at the doctor's office, just hoping that I didn't lose weight. I was like, please just be the same as yesterday or the day before. And I got down and I just watched it every day. The scale kept going down and down and down. And then finally, I just remember breaking down one night, and I just couldn't help it. I was sitting there with my wife, we're crying, and we're just like, what is this? What is this? She looks at me she's like, Stephen, you got to eat. She's never not seen me eat. Mm-hmm. And so for her, that was probably one of the toughest things too. And I would say without a doubt, that was probably the lowest point that I've had through this whole journey.
Would you say it was the depression maybe that was causing you not to eat, or what was it?
Yeah, I would definitely say depression, denial. I was like, this is not happening. This is not me. And I remember being able to fall asleep. When you stay awake for 20 hours, you're delirious almost, right? Like when you stay awake all night, you don't sleep, you may go in and out of sleep. I mean, I couldn't even sleep. So I'm sitting there and I remember just dozing off, and then I would wake up 20 minutes later. And for the first 20 seconds I was awake, I wouldn't remember that I had just been diagnosed with lung cancer. And so that was euphoric. And then I would really wake up and be like, oh God, no, this is actually happening.
Yeah.
And so the depression, man, it was awful. It really was.
I think depression is one of those things that I know some people will just naturally suffer from it a little more, but all of us had those moments where, man, when it hits you, when depression sneaks up on you and really grabs you, it snatches you down quick. And it's one of those things where you end up being so far down, you don't realize it at first. And then once you finally do, you've already been there for a minute. It tends to keep you longer than you want. What did you do to overcome that moment when you were so depressed that you had lost 30 pounds and you were emotional and you didn't know what to do next?
Man, I know that for me, it was really tough because I've always had a difficult time asking for help. Mm-hmm. Even when I was a kid growing up, hey, Stephen, you want me to help you tie your shoelaces? No, I got it. Do you want me to help you put your shirt on? No, I got it. And so I've always considered myself really independent, and that feeling of helplessness was so abnormal to me, and that feeling of just vulnerability. So I had to cope, and the only way that I knew how to cope was to push through it. And by pushing through it for me was just getting up and getting out of the house and going for a walk and doing things that I knew would help me get back on a routine. As an athlete, routine is paramount. I mean, routine is everything. Whether you play football, baseball, basketball, whatever, you have to have a routine. And so I just remember when I was in college, we used to do this exercise where when we got the ball back from the catcher after throwing a pitch, our coach would get his stopwatch out and he would time us. And he would want us to be within 1 or 2 seconds every single time when we threw a pitch, because he wanted us to get into the same exact routine every single time. And so for me, that's comfortability. That's feeling, like at home and peace. And so I remember getting up one day and my wife just kind of looked at me. She's like, "What are you going to do today?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to go for a run." And she says, "Stephen, you haven't eaten in 6 days. You've lost like 30 pounds. You don't need to go for a run." I said, "You know what? I just need to do this, because if I can prove to myself that I can do this, then I can maybe start to get back into a routine." And so it wasn't pretty. I went out into the neighborhood. It was 150 degrees. But I did it. I ran about a mile. I did it without stopping. And I just remember at the very end of it, I had my headphones in and I screamed at the top of my lungs. I just screamed. And so for me, that was almost like a release. That was like, okay, this happened. There's nothing you can do about it. Yeah. But you know what? You can do everything you want moving forward. You get to choose how you want to react to this. Mm-hmm. And so when I let that scream out, it was like I was a new person. I got back home. I think I ate like a cheeseburger or something. and so that I kind of just like said, look, this is it. I got to get into a routine. I'm going to start walking every day. And then when I feel good, I'm going to run. And then I'm going to go to work and I'm just going to focus on work and staying healthy. And so that's what picked me up.
Awesome. Yeah, we all have those moments where we take that hard right turn, and we are in control of a lot, obviously, but it sounds like to me, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, it's especially when you're young, you have your routine, you have your identity in your 20s, right? You're figuring out who you are, what you want to do. Mm-hmm. You'd already been through a lot of things in your life. You're about to start this new career, and then all of a sudden, hang on, there's another part of your life that you have to go through that's completely different than you thought it would be. And it really throws us into that helplessness. And when I talk to a lot of men, we're all, like you said, like if you ever played any kind of sport, that's a very masculine thing to do. And it's a very aggressive, and you have to be aggressive to be successful in a lot of the sports, whether it's mentally or physically or whatever the sport requires of it. And you get in this mindset where, you talk yourself into winning lots of times. Mm-hmm. And when you have cancer, you can talk yourself into winning, but at the end of the day, like it's out of your control in a lot of ways too. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things where what we've kind of taught ourselves to go through, to get better, to be the best, all of a sudden doesn't 100% work for, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then so we don't know what to do. And then we hit those moments where it's like, well, now what do I do if I'm not going to do this? And you start questioning everything, and you really have to reevaluate. But there's so much that we can do. I always tell everyone, we're only responsible for what we have. And if you have if you have a mindset, if you have a drive, a determination, you're responsible for using that. If you don't, then someone needs to kind of loan you a little bit while you're going through your tough time and everything. But I love the way you said, one day you just got up and like, enough's enough. I'm going to go do something about this. And I'm really going to put myself way out there and do something uncharacteristic of me, and go out and go for this run. And then came back, you were hungry, and then kind of probably took off from there. Mm-hmm. I'd like to know the role your wife played in, because you guys were newly married when all this kind of went down, right?
So we got engaged the summer of 2016, and we were engaged for not quite a year. But when I was diagnosed on June 1st, 2017, our wedding was September. So I got diagnosed a little under 3 months before we were supposed to get married. Yeah.
So what kind of role has she played in your recovery, your mindset, your body, everything like that?
So Emily has legitimately been everything in my life. And when I say everything, I mean everything. She has been my confidant. She's been my psychiatrist. She's been my soft place to land. She's been an ear to chew on. She's been, someone that I can vent to when I'm angry. Mm-hmm. She's literally been everything. And I have never met I've met a lot of people in life, but I have never met anyone as strong as Emily, in the sense that Emily has been there since day one. You know, she hasn't batted an eye, and she has really picked me up and motivated me to just move forward. And she gives me so much inspiration every single day. You know, I still struggle daily sometimes with dealing with cancer. I mean, I'm not out of the woods, and I don't think any of us are. You know, we always kind of have it sitting in the back of our minds, even if, you're cancer free. And so I have these moments where I'll just be like, I'm struggling right now. I'm not feeling so great about this. And she has always been there to be the positive soul that I need, because it could be so easy for her to just say, you know what, Stephen, you're right. Like, it's just really unfortunate. And I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say, but I feel bad. And it's just, at the end of the day, there's not much we can do. She has been the opposite. She's like, you know what, Stephen, at the end of the day, like, this has happened for a reason. We don't know what that reason is yet. But you're still here, and we're still together, and we still have a life together. And so for me, that is exactly what I need. And I would be totally lost without Emily in my life. And so she is an angel from God that was sent to me to take care of me, not just through this journey of cancer, but also through straightening me out and turning me into a responsible man and a good husband. And she deserves all of the credit for anything positive that I'm able to help contribute. So
it's so amazing to hear you say that. Yeah, that's I can tell you have a ton of gratitude towards her. Mm-hmm. So if someone out there today is listening and they're living with cancer as well too, what kind of advice do you have with them in order to have a peace of mind or happiness, or to worry less, or maybe to experience a little bit less depression? What kind of advice do you have for that person out there that's listening right now?
Well, I think no matter what, you are not defined by your disease. And one of the things that I really struggled with growing up was my identity. And what I mean by that is, growing up as an athlete, I always identified myself as the baseball player, Stephen, the baseball player. And as I grew through teenage and adult life, I kind of liked it because it symbolized, power and strength and popularity. And then, as my baseball career ended, I was a little lost. I was not sure what was going on with my life. And then I got diagnosed with cancer. And so overnight, I literally went from that guy that plays baseball to the guy with cancer. And it wasn't really until I was diagnosed that I was able to rekindle my relationship with God and my spiritual relationship, and to get baptized and to say, you know what, if I'm anything, it's not Stephen the baseball player, and it's not Stephen the guy with cancer. It's Stephen the child of God. And so for that, I'm forever thankful. And so any advice that I give to anyone out there is that you're not defined by your disease. You may have cancer, whatever type of cancer you have, but that's not who you are. The decisions you make, the attitudes you have, and how you choose to live your life is who you are.
I love that. Not Stephen the baseball player, not Stephen with cancer, but Stephen the child of God. That is so true. And, I have people who listen to the show who have the same beliefs as we do, and people that don't, but that is the 100% truth. And I love the fact that you said that. How would you say your spirituality has grown since your diagnosis and since you decided to kind of come back around on that?
And I can't tell you, growing up in a Christian environment, Christian household, church was always a big thing for our family. And then as I grew into my adult life, I never never moved Christ out of my life, but he certainly wasn't up here. He was not number one.
Right.
And living my adult life, I was focused on a lot of different things. And when I was diagnosed with cancer, I just remember like thinking in my head, well, this is what you get, right? This is what you get for not going to church, not being a good Christian. And so I had just started treatment. I had just had my port put in my chest, and I was feeling a little bit better physically, and I was kind of starting to work out of my depression. And my brother asked me to go to church, and I said no. And he said, he was very emphatic about it. He said, "Do you want to go?" I said, "No." So then a couple weeks later, he says, "Come on, let's go. It'll be fun." I said, "Okay, whatever. I'll go to church." So I went, and so having a port put in, you're prepped for like everything to come, chemo, and they're going to talk about doing your drugs intravenously and getting your drugs infused into your blood and everything. So I remember sitting in church, and I'm like, what am I doing here? Like this is not, I don't need to be here. And so the preacher gets up there, and he goes into his opening prayer, and I'm talking like 30 words in. He's like, "Lord," he goes, "we know you're here today. We want you to infuse yourself in our blood and, be with us here in this moment." And I'm sitting there, with my head down. I'm like, what did he just say? I'm like looking around. I like felt for my port. I'm like, did he just say infuse? So that's when I kind of was like, okay, maybe I am in the right place. Mm-hmm. I ended up getting baptized, and man, it was one of the greatest days of my life, mm-hmm. Aside from getting married. But I just remember sitting there and being like, what? I've never been baptized. I've never really lived the right Christian way. And if there's ever a moment that I can start new, and I can ask for forgiveness, and I can devote my life to Christ, this is it. And so ever since, it's really just been a huge spiritual awakening for me. And it's honestly, it's helped me cope with the diagnosis itself, because we talk a lot about, your calling, and sometimes God lays burdens on us, and we don't necessarily know, what to do or how to deal with it. But he gives us the tools to kind of figure that out. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I feel like this is my journey. This is my cross to bear. I can use my story to talk about, it's never too late to give yourself to Christ. Look at me. I got stage 4 lung cancer. I may not be here in 6 months, and I'm getting baptized, man. I'm talking about God. So for me, it's been a huge, huge turnaround in my life.
I love that, man. I love it. It's so funny. I talk about the mind, body, and spirit with so many people on here. And the spirit is the thing that people leave out the most, because they get caught up in the other two, and it's really easy to be encouraged to think a certain way and do all this. And also, like with your body, like to eat right and do all those things. But if you don't devote the time to your spirit, then you're going to be lost. And, it's going to sound funny when I say this, but I've never seen a happier stage 4 lung cancer patient than you. Like, you have a tremendous amount of gratitude for your life and for your wife and your experience and everything else. And you know what? Gratitude, like how great is life, in a way that we get to live, no matter what ailments and things that we have. We're here amongst other people, living together, encouraging one another, helping each other. Our situations are connecting with us with people that we've never been connected with before. I'm sure you've met a ton of people now that you never thought you would ever meet because of having lung cancer. And your story is inspiring so many other people to be a self-advocate, to listen to your body, all the things that you were talking about earlier. And even the fact that you're vulnerable enough now to talk about having depression and losing weight and all those other things, it really goes a long ways. And I tell everyone that, we just have to be available for God to use us, no matter if we have a, cancer or disease or whatever else is going on. Like, we have to be available. And lots of times, and I'll put myself in the stubborn category like most men, Us that are stubborn, or if you're athletic and everything else, like you tend to be pretty comfortable with doing things on your own because that's what you have to do, right, to be successful. Right. But when you stop and become available, that's when you see your life. Happiness comes and goes, but peace is eternal. And if you have an eternal peace walking around with it, it's infectious. People want to know, I'm sure you make people feel bad at school whenever they call out. You're like, well, I got lung cancer and I'm here every day. The kids probably act better in your classroom because in the situation that is. But you the way you carry yourself and everything else speaks volumes about who you are, and you cannot do that if you don't have the peace that you have and stuff. So I'm really, really happy, and it's super encouraging to see that and hear that from you. So everyone that can't see you at the moment, just know that that's what Stephen's portraying right now. That's one of the last questions I typically ask people is, what's the best thing that cancer has done for your life? Which is a weird question to ask people, but what's the best thing that you say it's done for your life?
Oh man, that is, so I would say, this is going to sound weird, but I would never call cancer a gift. And I say that just because I would never wish it upon anyone else. I wouldn't give it to you or I or anyone else. But I know that for me, it's kind of been this weird blessing in disguise. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is because since my diagnosis, June 1st, 2017, I have gotten so much love and support. I have gotten married. I have found my relationship with Christ. I have adopted 2 dogs. I've bought a house. And I appreciate life way more now than I ever did before I was diagnosed.
Yeah.
And I know that's like a weird thing to say, and that's kind of a weird perspective, but in a very weird way, I'm kind of like thankful for this journey that I've been given, because I view life through a different scope now. And, I would, if I could give myself advice, like years ago, looking back at myself, just kind of going through life, thinking things are important that really aren't. I would say, Stephen, it's not too late to live your life a good and a positive way. You don't need this like diagnosis to live a certain way. It's a choice that you and I make. It's a choice that we make every single day. How do we want to live our lives today? Do we want to have gratitude? Do we want to have peace? Do we want to serve others? Do we want to appreciate everything, that we have and be grateful for all of the things that we have, the love, the relationships, the support? Or do we just want to take all those things for granted and focus solely on, trying to make a lot of money or, whatever you're focused on, get a lot of material things. And so the biggest thing that I'm grateful for is just everything that I have. And the fact that this journey has given me, it's almost like it's just flipped a switch in my brain. I know that I'm a stronger person because of this battle. It's also kind of opened my eyes up to the importance of advocacy and doing what's right. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I think that's probably the biggest and most grateful thing that I have with this journey.
I love that. So all of this has inspired you to start your own nonprofit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Huff Project?
Yeah, so the Huff Project is I guess it's kind of poetic, I guess, because I have lung cancer and my last name's Huff. But when my wife and I were driving home one night after a doctor's appointment in Tennessee, they have, and I believe they have them in Georgia too, they have those specialty license plates. And so we saw one that said, Susan G. Komen, support breast cancer. And we were like, hey, why don't we support the lung cancer one? Let's go home and order it. And so,
sorry.
Oh, you're good. So we went home and we got onto the Department of Motor Vehicles. We looked at all the different license plates, and there was no lung cancer license plate. And so we were like, why is there no lung cancer license plate? And we contacted the Tennessee Department of Motor Vehicles, and they were like, yep, sorry, there's basically no lung cancer organizations in Tennessee that have done one. So light bulb, we were like, hey, why don't we do it? Why can't we do it? So we started that in January of 2018. And within 1 year, we were like, hey, let's try to do this. The way that you get the license plate printed is you have to get 1,000 people to sign up. And then you also have to raise $35 for each of those plates or pre-order. So you have to have 1,000 people and $35,000. Well, shortly into it, we were having a ton of success. I mean, we raised $10,000 in like a month.
Yeah.
So we were like, well, this is great, but like, what else can we do? Maybe we can do other things. And so that's really how the Huff Project was born. It was born as just a little idea about a license plate, and we wanted to be able to hold the funds, and we wanted to do it legally and not get in trouble. So we created this nonprofit for the state of Tennessee, and then we ended up doing 2 fundraising events in 2018. And we did a golf tournament, and we also did a songwriter night. And so over the course of our first year, we had about 200 signups for the license plate, and we raised almost $90,000 for lung cancer, which was really not expected at all. So in January of 2019, we made our first contribution to lung cancer research here in our community of Nashville. We donated $25,000 to Vanderbilt. They have a trial, an investigative research trial going on right now for preventative screening in lung cancer, where they look at someone's chest X-ray or CT, and they can do what's called a blood biopsy now. They can just pull some blood out of you and figure out, hey, is that cancer or is that, some type of other nodule? Wow. And it's much less evasive. Anyways, we're really proud of that. And so we just hope to continue to raise a ton of money and give it all away to research.
That's amazing, man. I love that.
Yeah.
So you guys have raised a ton of money through that. So tell me about this license plate. Where are we at with the license plate process? So
we have about 350 orders. We need to get to 1,000, and we've raised about $17,000 towards that $35,000 goal. Mm-hmm. And so we have until March of 2020 to do this. That's the deadline until they have to sign a new bill for it. So we're just hoping to try to get as many people to sign up. We're saying that you can go to our website, read a little bit about the statistics. The really cool part is when you buy a license plate, 60% of those proceeds are going to go directly to us, which we will then take that money and just basically give it right to research. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to pay for your tags, or get a new license plate each year, it's a great idea to support, something that you're really invested in. Like we're obviously invested in lung cancer, but that's it, man. That's the Lung Cancer Project.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I think you guys are going to reach your goal. I'm going to talk to you about something when we get off today and see if we can talk about with that. So to visit your website, it's called thehuffproject.org, thehuffproject.org. And if people want to connect with you, I know you're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So you can follow Stephen at The Huff Project on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And I'll put links to all of this in the show notes today. So as you're listening to the podcast, you can just click through the show notes and you can connect with Stephen. Stephen, I just want to acknowledge you for a second first of all, for being a guest on the show, being the first lung cancer. Man, I couldn't have had a better guest as far as representing the lung cancer community. But all that you've done so far, again, something we talked about, like being your own advocate, listening to your body. Mm-hmm. You talked about how your helplessness almost equaled your depression, and mm-hmm. really changing your mindset, adapting your body, and then just a spiritual awakening for yourself is to really, dedicate your life back to the Lord and to live a certain way that, that you haven't necessarily lived as well before, and all the things that you've done. And that's totally, I can tell, you just radiate a lot of gratitude and a lot of positivity. And that's contagious. That's probably why you guys have been so successful. People buy into you, and you're really easy to buy into when it comes into all the things that you're doing. People will trust you and want to donate to this. So hopefully people listening today, if you have lung cancer, know someone, definitely go on to the huffproject.org, donate some money towards Stephen and his foundation. It definitely will go to a great place. But Stephen, again, I really appreciate you, and I'm so excited to see what you're going to do. I've got a lot of cool connections in Nashville that we'll talk about as well too, and we'll get you guys squared away and keep fighting the battle for lung cancer and young adults, and just keep being excellent at what you're doing, man. I'm sure you're a great teacher. I'm sure you're a great husband, and you got a lot to be thankful for through your circumstances. So again, I appreciate you for recognizing that gratitude and just recognizing all the things that God's done for you and continues to do for you, man. So I really appreciate you being a guest on the show today.
Man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you having me on, Truett. This is awesome. Just getting to talk to you and feeding off of your positive energy too. It's so crazy to me that there's so many people walking around on this earth that are dealing with their disease, whether it's like cancer or, other debilitating diseases too. But just looking at you, I would never in a million years guess, that you're a cancer survivor, and your positive attitude, your gratitude and the fact that you do this show, just helping others hear, other people's stories is so powerful. I can't tell you, man, when I was diagnosed, I think the number one Google search on my search engine was young, non-smokers stories, survival stories, success stories. And that was huge for me. If I could just see someone that was living life and doing well and beating cancer, that gave me so much hope and energy. And the fact that you do this and you broadcast it, and that you give other people the opportunity to hear survival stories and success stories, I can't tell you, man, but that's like so powerful. And it really is. It's a tribute to you as a person and all the great things that you're doing, man.
That means a lot. I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
All right, well, you guys go check out the huffproject.org and connect with Stephen. And Stephen, we'll stay in touch with you and we'll talk with you soon. Okay, bud?
All right, that sounds great, Truett.
We appreciate you spending time with us on today's episode and encourage you to continue the conversation to help you keep pushing forward. For more resources based on today's episode, as well as ways to recommend a guest and connect to Truett personally, head over to 1%podcast.com. Be sure to join us next time for more stories of inspiration right here with Truett Taylor on the 1% Podcast.